The great hall of the Ithari Palace held its breath, 300 voices, silent, because the queen was speaking, because when Aeliana Vor'Thess stood at the center of the assembly, even the wind outside the tall crystal windows seemed to pause. She was 22 years old. Her hair fell like ribbons of sunlight down her back, so pale gold it looked almost white in the morning light. Her skin was the color of new snow. Her eyes, that strange, impossible blue silver of her mother's line, swept the room slowly, not with pride, with duty. The trade accords with the meridian systems, she said, will be ratified before the season turns. A murmur of approval rose from the ministers. She smiled, small, practiced, and then she fell. It happened in less than a heartbeat. Her knees buckled. Her hand reached for the polished stone rail, missed. The crown on her head slipped forward and struck the marble floor with a bright, terrible sound. The court exploded in noise. Servants rushed forward. Ministers stood up, two fast chairs scraping. Someone screamed, a high, thin sound. It might have been her old nursemaid. It might have been the palace itself, because this was the third time this month, and everyone in the room knew what it meant. She woke on the healing couch in her private chamber. The device beneath her hummed softly, adjusting itself to support her weakened muscles. She hated it. She hated the way it whispered. She hated the way it made her feel like a leaf being held up by careful hands. She lifted her fingers to her hair. Someone had brushed it while she slept, neatly, lovingly. Sariel, her handmaiden, her almost sister, the woman who had held her hand at her mother's funeral 3 years ago and whispered, "You will never be alone, not while I live." Sariel sat beside her now, eyes red. "Your Majesty." How long? 2 hours. Aeliana closed her eyes. 2 hours gone. 2 hours she could not spend investigating. 2 hours she could not spend planning. 2 hours the Empire had drifted without her. "Water," she said. Sariel brought it, held the cup to her lips. Aeliana wanted to say she could hold it herself, except she couldn't. Not today. Her fingers shook. "They are saying," Sariel whispered, "that the physicians have new projections." "Of course they do. The Council of Elders is meeting. Of course they are. Your uncle has requested an audience." There it was. Aeliana's eyes opened, slowly, carefully. She did not let her face change, but something inside her chest tightened into a small, hard knot. "Tell my uncle I will see him tomorrow. He said it was urgent." "Then tell him twice." Sariel laughed, quiet, sad, and squeezed her hand. Aeliana squeezed back and thought, "If you knew what I know, would you still be smiling at me like that?" She did not know yet. She would, but not today. That night, when the palace had gone quiet and even the guards had stopped moving in the corridors, Aeliana rose from her couch on her own. It took her 7 full minutes to cross the room. She counted every step, because counting was easier than thinking about how she used to run through these halls when she was 6 years old, chasing her father's hunting hound, her mother laughing somewhere behind her. She reached the vanity table, sat down, picked up the small silver-framed portrait of her mother, Queen Aeliana Vor'Thess, painted the year Aeliana was born, 28 years old in the painting, beautiful, radiant, alive. Aeliana touched her mother's face through the glass. "I'm trying," she whispered, "but I'm so tired." She meant tired of pretending, tired of the dinners, tired of smiling at the man who had killed her mother, tired of playing weaker than she was because a queen who is dying, and stupid is a queen who lives longer than a queen who is dying and clever. 3 years she had been watching, 3 years she had been gathering, 3 years since her mother had held her hand on a bed exactly like this one and said, "My darling, it is not the illness. Do not let them tell you it is the illness. Watch him, watch," and then her mother had died. Mid-sentence, Aeliana pressed the portrait to her chest. "I know, mother. I heard you. I have been watching." Her reflection in the mirror stared back at her, a young woman with a river of pale gold hair, blue silver eyes, a crown she was not sure she would live to wear another year. She whispered to the reflection, "You will not die like she did." She almost believed it. Across the palace, in a wing so far from the throne rooms that the air still smelled faintly of laboratory sterilizers, instead of Jasmine, a man named Marcus Ellsworth sat alone in a small research office. He was 44 years old. He did not feel like himself anymore. Some days he wondered if he ever had, because on Earth 3 years ago he had been a husband, a father, a researcher who believed in good outcomes, and then in one impossible summer, he had lost all 3 of those things. His wife had signed the papers first. She said she couldn't look at him without seeing Lily. He couldn't blame her. He couldn't look at himself either. He had come to Veloth 3 months ago, half exile, half prayer, because Earth had too many rooms with too many little painted flowers on the walls, too many drawers with tiny folded socks he could not bring himself to throw away. Veloth had none of that. Veloth was strange, beautiful, distant. Veloth did not know Lily Ellsworth had ever existed. That was supposed to be a mercy. He kept a photograph in the top drawer of his desk. He did not look at it much. He did not need to. Her face lived behind his eyelids at night. She had been 8 years old, blonde, freckles across her nose like small brown stars. She had died on his lap in a hospital bed and asked him for a glass of water 30 seconds before she stopped breathing. He had not fetched it in time. He would remember that until he died. He shook his head, cleared the thought like a man clearing frost from a windshield, turned back to the projection table in front of him. He was reviewing archived Ithari medical records, cross-referencing them for a routine assignment on quarantine protocols. Nothing important. He liked it that way. Nothing important meant nothing to lose. His assistant, Talia Brennock, leaned in the doorway. She was 30, sharp-tongued, sharper-minded, the kind of woman who could argue with a general and win. She had followed him here from Earth. He had never asked why. He had assumed loneliness. He was too tired to ask better questions. "You're supposed to eat," she said. "I ate yesterday." "I said today, doctor." "That is what I heard." She threw a wrapped nutrient bar at him. It hit him in the chest. He caught it on reflex. She grinned. "Sleep would also be legal." "Noted." "You look terrible." "I look tired." "You look terrible tired." Big difference. He almost smiled. Almost. She saw the almost and counted it as a victory and left him alone. He unwrapped the bar, chewed without tasting, turned back to the file, and that was when he saw it. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks. He scrolled back, read again, zoomed in. The record was labeled, anonymously, Case Study Sample 47A. It was one of dozens he had been given for pattern matching against off-world quarantine data. He had been ignoring most of them, but this one, he leaned forward. The degeneration markers, the inflammatory cascades, the very specific collapse pattern in the neural support tissues. He knew this pattern. He knew it the way a mother knows the sound of her child's cry across a crowded park. He had spent 3 years chasing this exact chemical signature, not for glory, not for publication, for one reason only, because it was what had killed Lily. His hand shook. He set the bar down. He was not aware he had set it down. He tapped the file. He unlocked the patient identifier. The name flickered onto the display in pale gold letters. Aeliana Vor'Thess, Sovereign of Ithari, the Queen. He stared, did not breathe, because if he was right, if this was really the same pattern, then 2 things were true at once. 1, the Queen was dying. 2, he was possibly the only person in this galaxy who might know how to stop it. And then a 3rd thing, slower, colder, because Lily's illness had not been a natural disease. It had been triggered by an environmental toxin, which meant. He sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. "Oh God," he said, "oh God," because the Queen of Ithari was not sick. She was being poisoned. He did not sleep. The lights in his office cycled from artificial night into artificial dawn, and he did not notice. Talia came in twice, left twice. The second time she brought coffee, actual coffee. She had smuggled it in her personal cargo when they left Earth. He drank it without looking up. He pulled every file he was permitted to access. He built model after model. He fed the biochemistry into predictive simulators. Every simulation agreed. Every one. The pattern was not native to Ithari physiology. It was not genetic. It had been introduced slowly, carefully, over months, in doses so small that no scan looking for infection would ever find it. He had seen it before, on a small human colony 40 years ago, a groundwater incident. 12 children had died. Lily's biochemistry had matched 3 of them. He did not know why. He had never known why. He knew now. He whispered to the empty room, "Someone did this on purpose." And then he whispered quieter, twice. He looked at the photograph in the drawer. He did not open it. He did not need to. "Lily," he said, "I'm going to try." The words felt strange in his mouth. He had not tried in a very long time. Trying was terrifying. Trying was a promise. Trying meant you could fail again. He closed the drawer. "I'm going to try." By mid-morning, he had prepared a preliminary treatment model. It was not a cure, not yet, but it was a bridge, a metabolic bypass that could halt the cascade by time, maybe even reverse the damage if applied correctly. He submitted a formal request to speak to the Royal Medical Council. The reply came back too fast, too polite. He recognized the tone. Someone important was already watching. The audience was granted for that afternoon. Talia found him staring at his hands. "You okay, boss? I'm about to walk into a room of the most respected physicians in the Empire," he said, "and tell them that everything they believe about their queen's illness is wrong." "Yeah, that's Tuesday for you. It's Wednesday. Even worse." He almost laughed. He rose, straightened his coat, because he did not have council robes and did not particularly want them. He walked out into the palace corridor, and his shoes echoed on stone that had been laid 3 centuries before he was born. He was afraid. He was also, for the first time in 3 years, something else. He did not have a name for it yet, but it felt a little like being awake. The Royal Medical Council convened in a chamber shaped like a half-open flower. its curved walls lined with softly glowing panels of shifting bioluminescent moss. 9 physicians, all older than Marcus, all senior, all wearing the pale silver-threaded robes of the Empire's highest medical order. At the head of the semicircle sat Kavo Ron, 68 years old, his long ears streaked with silver, angled back a posture Marcus would later learn meant guarded skepticism. His hands were folded on the table before him, very still, the stillness of a man who had spent 50 years watching young researchers walk into rooms just like this one and be politely destroyed. "Dr. Ellsworth," Kavo said. His voice was rich, deep, unhurried. "You have requested this counsel on a matter concerning Her Majesty." "Yes, please state your claim." Marcus took a breath, because there was no soft way to say this, because he had chosen not to soften it. "Her Majesty," he said, "is not suffering from a genetic, degenerative condition. She is suffering from prolonged, low-dose exposure to a synthetic neurotoxin." The chamber went silent, not the polite silence of confusion, the louder silence of 9 people, all deciding at the same moment to be angry. One of the younger physicians laughed, a short bark. It was not amused. Kavo did not react at all. "Dr. Ellsworth," Kavo said mildly, "you are aware that this council has studied Her Majesty's condition for 8 months. Yes, you are aware that we have identified genetic markers consistent with a rare hereditary syndrome." I believe you have identified the effects of the toxin correctly, but you have mistaken those effects for cause." Another physician leaned forward. "You are suggesting," he said slowly, "that the Queen is being poisoned." Marcus did not blink. "I am." The silence tightened. Kavo Ran finally moved. He lifted one hand, set it back down, said, "You are a visiting researcher. You have been on Veloth for 3 months. You are the newest medical presence in this palace, and you would have this council believe that we who have served the Vor'Thess line for 4 generations have missed a poisoning. Yes, that is statistically improbable, I know." Kavo's ear twitched. The barest fraction. "Show us." Marcus activated the projection table. His hands were steady, not because he was calm, because he had done this presentation 11 times in his head, between 2 and 4 in the morning. He walked them through it. The biochemistry, the cascade, the parallel case on the Earth colony 40 years ago, the similarity in the enzyme response, the way the damage was not radiating outward from a genetic point of origin as it should if it were hereditary, but concentrating in specific tissue types, exactly as it would if it were being introduced through a slow metabolizing carrier. He did not mention Lily. He did not have to, because when he finished, one of the older women physicians said quietly, "You have seen this before, in a personal capacity." Marcus looked at her. He said yes. He did not elaborate. She nodded. She did not press. Kavo Ran studied him for a long time. His eyes were very tired. Marcus recognized the kind of tiredness. It was the tiredness of a man who had watched something he loved wither and did not know how to stop it. "Dr. Ellsworth," Kavo said finally, "yes, if you are wrong, and we attempt what you suggest, Her Majesty may die faster. Yes, and if you are right, and we do nothing, she will die anyway, in weeks." The council did not answer. Marcus said quieter, "Please, let me speak to her." Kaivo Ran was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Wait outside." Marcus waited outside. For an hour and a half. He was starting to wonder if they had simply forgotten him when the great carved doors opened. Kaivo stepped out, alone. He looked at Marcus for a long moment and then said in a voice too quiet for anyone else to hear, "Her Majesty has requested you." Marcus's mouth went dry. When? Now. He did not remember the walk to her chamber. He remembered the corridors were long. He remembered his shoes made too much noise. He remembered a servant with pale gray-blue skin passing him carrying a tray of untouched food. He remembered thinking, "She isn't eating." The doors opened. The chamber was smaller than he had expected, warmer, bathed in the soft light of a wide crystal window that overlooked the palace gardens, and in the center of the room, on a low couch of pale wood and white cushions, sat Queen Aeliana Vor'Thess. He forgot how to speak, because he had known she was young. He had read the file. 22, he had known, and still, she was not what he had expected. Her hair spilled over her shoulder like a river of gold caught in sunlight. She was very pale, the paleness of illness, yes, but also the paleness of a portrait of something painted. Her cheekbones were high and delicate. Her mouth was small, serious. Her eyes were the color of stormlight on water. She was breathtaking, and she was so young. She was, he thought, only 14 years older than Lily would have been. His hand, without asking his permission, went to his coat pocket, where a small silver bracelet lived, a child's bracelet, braided links, a tiny engraved star. Aeliana was watching him. She saw the hand, she saw the pocket, she saw him. She did not say anything for a very long time. Then she said softly, "You're crying." Marcus lifted his fingers to his face, startled because he had not known there was a single tear on his cheek. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be sorry." Her voice was very quiet. "Why?" He looked at her. He tried to answer. His mouth failed him. She waited. She was very good at waiting. Finally he said, "You remind me of someone I have lost." Aeliana's face did not change, but something behind her eyes did. She said, "Sit down, Dr. Ellsworth." He sat. She looked at him for what felt like a long time. Then she said, "Do you know why I called for you?" "I assumed the council. The council believes I called for you because they told me to, and you didn't. I called for you because I read your files myself 3 hours ago while the council was still debating whether to permit your audience." He blinked. "You read I have been reading every foreign researcher's file for the last 3 years. You are the first one who has ever caught my attention. May I ask why?" "You will." She smiled a little, very tired. Then she said the thing that changed everything. She said, "You think it is poison." Marcus's whole body went cold, because she had not asked it as a question. She had said it as a statement. He said carefully, "Yes." She nodded. Once, like a woman checking off a box on a list she had been holding for a very long time, she said, "So do I." The silence in the room felt enormous. Marcus's hand tightened on his knee, because he had not expected this. He had prepared for skepticism, rage, denial, grief. He had not prepared for a young woman with a river of pale gold hair, simply nodding and confirming that yes, she also believed someone was killing her. He said, "How long? How long have I known?" "Yes. 3 years. 3 years." He whispered, "You were 19. I was 19. How did? My mother told me. She died holding my hand and telling me. She said, "It is not the illness. Watch him." And then she died. Watch him. Aeliana looked out the window. Watch him, she agreed. Him. She turned her face back to him. Her eyes were very steady, steadier than any 22-year-old's eyes had any right to be. My uncle, Marcus said, Sarath Vokun. Sarath Vokun. Your mother told you. She told me, and then I watched. For 3 years I watched. I watched him at every dinner, every council, every festival. I watched him grieve so publicly, so beautifully, that half the empire mourned my mother in his arms. I watched him place his hand on my shoulder at her funeral and whisper, "You are not alone, my dear. I will guide you." I watched him drink from cups that had touched her lips only weeks before. She paused, breathed, then softer. And then 8 months ago I began to feel tired, and I knew. Marcus was not aware his own breathing had slowed. He said, "You have known for 8 months." "Yes, and you have said nothing." Dr. Ellsworth, she smiled without humor, "I am 22 years old. My counsel is older than I am. My uncle is older than my counsel. He was the man who signed the papers of my regency when my mother died. He is the second most powerful person in this palace, and he has spent 3 years positioning himself as my beloved caretaker. If I had accused him with no proof, I would have died within the week of natural progression." Marcus closed his eyes. "So you played sicker than you were. I played weaker. He does not attack the weak. He waits for them. And in the meantime, she said, I have been gathering." Marcus opened his eyes. "Gathering." She stood. Slowly, he rose to help her, and she waved him off. Very small motion, very firm, and crossed the room by herself. She opened a panel in the wall behind the couch. From inside, she withdrew a small, dark cylinder. She turned it in her fingers. "Bank transfers," she said. "Correspondence, purchase records, servant movements, names of suppliers I do not recognize. The dates of my mother's worst days match the dates of certain shipments. So do mine." She set the cylinder on the table between them. "I do not have enough to convict him. Not in front of the assembly, not yet. And I do not have the strength to survive if I move too soon." Marcus stared at the cylinder, then at her. Then he said, "You did not need a doctor." "I did." "You needed a witness." She looked at him, and for the first time since he had entered the room, her expression cracked. Just a little, just at the edges, enough to show him the exhausted girl inside the queen. She said, "I needed someone from outside, someone whose loyalty had not been bought when I was still a child, someone who could confirm what I already knew so that I would stop wondering if I had lost my mind. You have not. You are certain. I am certain." She closed her eyes, just for a moment, just long enough that a single strand of gold hair slipped forward across her cheek. Then she opened them. "Thank you," she said. 2 words, but Marcus had not been thanked like that in 3 years. They talked for 2 hours. She asked precise questions, sharper than any counsel he had ever addressed. She wanted to know how his treatment would work, what could go wrong, what his failure rates had been in prior studies. She wanted to know how he had arrived at this hypothesis. She wanted to know why he had cried when he walked into her room. When she asked that last one, he was quiet for a while. Then he said, 3 years ago I had a daughter." He did not look at her when he said it. Her name was Lily. He heard her breathing change, small change, deliberate. She was 8. He paused. He had never said the next part out loud. She died of an illness that looked exactly like yours. The silence stretched. Aeliana said, the same toxin. I don't know, maybe, related, similar enough that I spent 3 years chasing it after she was gone. I never found the answer in time to save her. Aeliana's voice, when it came, was very soft. But you may have found it in time to save me. Maybe. She reached out. Her hand, pale, slim, faintly trembling, settled over his on the arm of the couch. He almost pulled away. Reflex. Because he had not been touched with tenderness by anyone in 3 years, he did not pull away. She said, Dr. Ellsworth. Marcus. She said, I am so sorry about your daughter. Something inside him broke open, small and quiet, like a shell cracking. He did not cry. He did not have to. She saw. She said, I do not need you to save me because I am a queen. I need you to help me save myself. And in return, I promise you, whatever happens, that your Lily will not be forgotten in this palace. Not while I breathe. She lifted her hand. The moment passed. He did not know what to do with the space it left behind. She said, now, tell me what you need to begin. That evening, a formal dinner had been arranged. Aeliana had insisted on attending. It was, she explained privately to Marcus, in the corridor, the 3rd such dinner in as many weeks. Her uncle had been organizing them under the guise of boosting the queen's morale. She suspected it was so that he could observe the pace of her decline. I want you there, she said. As what? As the visiting off-world specialist reviewing my hereditary condition, nothing more. Watch him. Tell me tomorrow what you see. You want me to observe him. I want you to see for yourself what I have been seeing alone for 3 years. Marcus looked at her, at the very deliberate way she was holding herself upright, at the slight tremor she was doing her best to hide. You are not up for a dinner. Marcus? Yes, I have not been up for a dinner in 8 months. I attend anyway, because if he sees me stop, he moves faster. Marcus was quiet. Then he said, understood. The dining hall of Ithari was designed to make guests feel small. Vaulted ceilings of colored stone, a long table of dark polished wood, 100 candles floating in the air suspended by fields. Marcus did not fully understand and had stopped trying to. Servants moved silently along the walls. The plates arrived without sound. Aeliana sat at the head. She wore a gown of pale silver. Her hair had been braided and pinned in a low, elegant coil. She wore no crown that evening. She looked, Marcus thought, like a young woman playing the role of a queen very well. She looked like she was surviving. To her right sat Sarath Vokun. Marcus had never seen him before. He had seen images. Images did not do him justice. Sarath was tall, broad-shouldered, 58 years old, with the kind of quiet handsome that came from health and confidence and never having been told no. His hair was silver gold cut short. His eyes were the same blue-silver as Aeliana's but colder, winter light instead of storm light. He rose when Marcus entered, extended a hand. You must be Dr. Ellsworth. Yes. My dear niece has told me all about your interest in her condition. Has she? She speaks very highly of your intelligence. I'm flattered. You should be. My niece does not flatter people. Marcus shook his hand. It was warm, firm, steady, the hand of a man who did not have a shaking bone in his body. The hand of a man, Marcus thought, who had held Aeliana's mother's hand at her deathbed. He sat. The dinner began. He watched. He watched Sarath pour Aeliana's wine himself, as always, my dear, waving away the servant. He watched Aeliana take a small, polite sip and set the cup aside, untouched. He watched Sarath notice this, watched the tiny tightening at the corner of his mouth, watched him make a joke to cover it, something about her appetite, something warm. He watched Aeliana laugh at the joke, perfectly on cue, perfectly hollow. He watched Sarath place a hand over hers briefly, the way an uncle might, the way a father might, the way a man might who wanted the whole table to see him being loving. He watched Aeliana not flinch, which was, Marcus realized slowly, its own kind of strength, because he could see in the smallest muscle around her jaw that she wanted to. He watched the ministers watch Sarath. He watched the ministers watch Aeliana. He watched who nodded when Sarath spoke, who looked away, who stared at their plates. He built a map in his head, a quiet map. The dinner lasted 2 hours. At the end, Sarath rose and lifted his cup. "To my niece," he said, "may her strength return to her, so that this empire may continue to enjoy her light, as it has enjoyed her mother's before her." The table drank. Aeliana smiled and did not. Marcus felt something cold slide down his spine, because as it has enjoyed her mother's before her was a strange thing to say about a woman who had died at 46 of what everyone at this table was pretending was an illness, unless you did not think of her as dead, only as enjoyed, consumed, finished. He met Sarath's eyes across the table. Sarath smiled, and for one clean, cold second, Marcus saw it. Not proof, not evidence, not anything he could point to in a court, just a smile. That did not reach the eyes. Aeliana was watching him, watching. She said nothing, but under the table, very quietly, her foot touched his, once, just once. It said, "You saw." He said nothing. He had. After the dinner, she asked him to walk with her, only to the door of her chamber, only as the visiting physician escorting the queen after a fatiguing event. 2 guards followed at a respectful distance. Kaivo Ron fell in on her other side, silent as a shadow, watching Marcus with an expression that had not yet decided what it was. They walked slowly. The palace corridors were cool. Somewhere a musician was practicing. The notes drifted down from an open balcony. Halfway to her chamber, Aeliana stopped, rested one hand on the wall, breathed. "I'm fine," Marcus said. "You are not." Kaivo said, "Your Majesty, we can send for the couch." I said I am fine. She was not fine, but she straightened and walked. At her chamber door, she turned to Marcus. "Dr. Ellsworth." "Yes." "Did you see it?" "I saw it." His smile did not reach his eyes. She closed her eyes, just for a moment. She had been holding something. Now she set it down. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing him. It has been a very long 3 years." Marcus, who had not slept a full night in 3 years, understood exactly what she meant. He said, "You are not alone anymore." He had not planned to say it. It came out anyway. Kaivo Ron, watching from 3 steps back, said nothing at all, but his ears, Marcus noticed, had shifted forward, very slightly, curious. Aeliana looked at Marcus. Her eyes shone. She did not cry. She had learned somewhere, some year of her young life, not to cry in front of people. She said, "I have something to show you tomorrow." What? Everything I have. Everything. 3 years of gathering. All of it. I want you to see it. I want you to help me build the case. And then, when my body is strong enough, I will destroy him. Marcus said, You mean you. Personally. I mean me. Personally. In front of the assembly. Because if someone else takes him down, they will make me their debt. And I have already paid too many debts I did not sign for. He looked at her, at the tired young queen with a river of gold hair, at the steel under all of it. He said, Understood. She said, Good night, Marcus. She said his name softly, like it belonged to her. He said, Good night, Your Majesty. She smiled, very small, very briefly. Then she stepped inside her chamber. The doors closed. The guards took their posts. Kaivo Ron did not move for a long moment. Then Kaivo turned to Marcus and said, Quiet, so no one else could hear Dr. Ellsworth. Yes, if you are lying to her, I am not. If you are wrong, I might be, but I am not lying. Kaivo studied him. Then Kaivo said, She has not smiled like that in 3 years. He walked away before Marcus could answer. Marcus stood alone in the corridor for a long time. The musician above him kept playing. The notes were slow, sad, beautiful. He touched his coat pocket, felt the small braided bracelet inside. He whispered, Lily. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to, because for the first time in 3 years, he had walked into a room that did not smell like her absence. For the first time in 3 years, he had a reason to be awake in the morning. For the first time in 3 years, he was not merely surviving. He was needed, not just as a scientist, not just as a specialist. A young woman, 22 years old, with her mother's death painted on her memory and her uncle's smile inside her wine, had looked across a room at him and said, So do I. And now they were going to do this together. He did not know yet that within 24 hours she would place 3 years of her life in his hands. He did not know yet that within a week the first treatment would fail. He did not know yet how badly he would break and how much he would need her to hold him up. He did not know yet that he had walked into the room a widower and would walk out eventually something else. He knew only what the palace corridor knew, what the slow music knew, what his coat pocket knew. He was awake. Somewhere in a chamber behind the closed doors, a young queen was brushing her river of gold hair before bed and looking at a portrait of her mother and saying softly for the first time in 3 years, Mother, I think I found someone who sees him. She kissed her fingers, pressed them to the glass. I love you. She turned out the light. And in that dark chamber and in that quiet corridor, on a night with 2 moons and 1,000 ships gliding silently through the sky, 2 people who had each lost the person who mattered most to them in the world, had, without knowing it yet, just begun to save each other. The morning after the dinner, Aeliana slept until noon. She did not mean to. She simply did not wake up. Her body took the hours it needed, and when her eyes finally opened, sunlight was falling across her pillow like spilled honey, and Sariel was sitting in the chair beside the bed with her mending in her lap, humming. That humming. Aeliana had known that humming since she was 3 years old. She lay very still and listened to it, and thought about how she was going to have to stop trusting the woman who had rocked her to sleep as a child, because she did not yet know Sariel was a traitor, but she suspected. She had suspected for 6 months. She just did not want to be right. You're awake? Barely. How do you feel? Like a corpse. But arrested one, Sariel laughed. It was such a familiar laugh, warm, bright, the laugh that had carried Aeliana through her mother's funeral, through the coronation she had not wanted, through 3 years of cold beds and public smiles. Aeliana reached for her hand. Sariel took it. Aeliana said, "You have been with me since I was very small. Since you were 3 days old, Your Majesty. Your mother placed you in my arms herself. I remember. You cannot remember. You were 3 days old. I remember." Sariel laughed again, squeezed her hand, and Aeliana looked at that face, the crinkling at the corners of the eyes, the small silver in the hair, the woman who had brushed her hair 1,000 mornings, and thought, "Please, let me be wrong about you." She would not be, but she did not know that yet. Marcus arrived at her chamber at 2 in the afternoon. He had not slept. He had not been able to, because his mind had been running through variables all night, because every hour he did not begin the treatment was an hour the toxin advanced, because a young woman with a river of gold hair had asked him to save her, and he did not know how to fail again. He did not know how to succeed either, but he was going to try. Kavo Rand met him at the door. The old physician looked tired. He also looked like he had made a decision. Marcus recognized the look. It was the look of a man who had spent the night arguing with himself and had finally lost the argument. "Dr. Ellsworth." Kavo Rand, "Come with me." "Where?" "The Queen has asked for both of us." They walked. Kavo Rand said quietly, "I have been thinking about what you said, and I do not want to believe it. I understand. But there are things I have wondered for a very long time." Marcus glanced at him. Kavo did not look back. Kavo said, "Her mother died in my arms, not on the couch, not in the medical chamber, in my arms, because I was holding her. She said the same thing. She said, 'Watch him.' I thought she was delirious." Marcus said nothing. Kavo said, "I did not watch him." His voice was very steady, but there was something underneath it, something that had been eating him for 3 years. Marcus said, "You could not have known. I could have wondered." Wondering is not the same as knowing. Kavo Rand stopped walking. For just 1 second, in the middle of the corridor, he said, "I have wondered for 3 years. Then he kept walking. Aeliana was waiting for them in her private study, not the ceremonial one, the small one, the one that had belonged to her mother, the one with the reading window and the shelves crowded with old books she had not been able to bring herself to reorganize. She was dressed simply, a pale blue robe, her hair was loose, she was standing. Marcus felt his chest tighten, because standing on her own was work, because she had done the work anyway, because she was going to stand in this room for her mother's ghost. She smiled when they entered, small, steady. "Kaivo, Your Majesty, sit." The old physician sat. She did not sit. She turned to a shelf, pressed a hidden panel, and a section of wall slid aside. Behind it was a room, a small one, just an alcove, but every wall was covered. Papers, photographs, data cards, handwritten notes pinned with silver clips, a 3-year-old timeline stretching from one end of the alcove to the other, threads of pale gold cord linking dates, to names, to bank routes, to shipping manifests. Kavo Rand did not move. He stared. Then he said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Your Majesty." "Yes." "How long?" 3 years. Alone. Alone. Kavo Rand closed his eyes. Aeliana said gently, the way a young woman speaks to an old man she loves. I did not tell you because I did not know if I could trust anyone. I am sorry. Kaivo Ran opened his eyes. There was water in them. He said, "You were 19. Yes, you have been 19 for 3 years. She did not answer that because it was true, because grief had frozen her at the age her mother had died, because until yesterday afternoon, when a man from Earth had walked into her chamber crying without knowing why she had lived in that frozen room alone, Kaivo Ran stood, crossed the study, and knelt in front of her chair, an old man, 68 years old, in his silver-threaded robes, knelt. "Your Majesty." "Kaivo, please stand." "No." "Please." "No." He took her hand. His voice was ruined. He said, "I held you when you were 3 days old. I taught you to say my name when you were 2. I stood behind your mother when she placed a small crown on your head at your first naming. I have loved you as if you were my own child, and I have been asleep for 3 years while you have been alone." Aeliana's mouth trembled. She did not let it. She said quietly, "You are not asleep now." "No." "Then rise." He rose. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, very quick, as if hoping no one had seen. Marcus, standing by the door, looked at his shoes, because this was not for him, but because it had already changed him. They spent 5 hours in that alcove. Aeliana walked them through everything, every thread, every date, every shipment, every bank route. She explained her mother's illness, her own, the overlap, the pattern, the gaps, the places where she had not been able to confirm, and the places she was certain. Kaivo Ran asked questions no one else could have asked, because he had been in the palace for 40 years, because he remembered which suppliers had changed hands and when, because he remembered the year Sarath had suddenly become interested in botanical research, because he remembered the exact week the household kitchens had been reorganized 6 months before Queen Isarala had first fallen ill. By the end of the 5 hours, the alcove had a new thread, a thick one, made of silver, going straight from Sarath Vokun's name to Aeliana Vor'Thess's death date. Marcus watched Aeliana add that thread. She did it slowly. Her hand did not shake, but when she stepped back and looked at it, she said softly to the wall, "There you are, Mother." That was all. But Marcus, who had a small braided bracelet in his coat pocket, understood exactly what she meant. They planned in the study. They agreed on the shape of the plan. Marcus would begin treatment, publicly, under the sanction of Kaivo Ran, who would announce to the council that he had reviewed Marcus's methodology and found it worthy of trial. This would give Sarath something to watch, something to focus on, a visible battle. Meanwhile, quietly, Aeliana would use her recovery or her further decline, if it came to that, as cover to continue gathering. She would tighten the net. She would draw 1 or 2 of Sarath's allies into revealing themselves. She would prepare the moment she would walk into the assembly hall on her own feet, not carried, not supported, on her own feet, and she would end him. "How long?" Marcus asked. "Until I strike." "Yes, until my body can carry me across the assembly floor without a tremor," she said. "That is the day. That may be weeks. Then it will be weeks. Or it may be never. Then it will be never, and I will die with a full account of who killed me, and my council will have to decide what to do with the account when I am gone." Ran said quiet, "It will not be never." "You cannot know that." "I know it." She looked at him. For one clean second she was not a queen. She was a young woman being told by an old man who had held her as a baby that she was going to live. She almost broke. She did not. She said, "Then we begin." They began. The next morning, Marcus stood in the primary medical wing, surrounded by the finest equipment on the planet, and prepared the first infusion. Talia Brennick stood beside him, sharp-eyed, careful, loyal. He did not know yet that she had already been bought, that Serath Vokun's people had visited her 3 weeks ago at the small apartment she kept in the palace's diplomatic quarter, that they had shown her photographs of her younger brother back on Earth, that they had explained very kindly that her brother worked at a warehouse near a dock, and that dockside accidents were unfortunately very common, and that they hoped Talia's cooperation would ensure no such accident ever happened to him. She had not slept that night either. She had cried in her bathroom for 2 hours. Then she had said yes. She said yes because she was 30 years old and had spent her whole life protecting her little brother and did not know how to stop. She loved Marcus, not romantically, as a friend, as a mentor, as a mourning man she had followed to another planet because she could not stand to watch him disappear inside himself. She did not want to hurt him. She was going to. She was going to add 1 drop, just 1, to the second infusion, not enough to kill the queen, enough to make the treatment appear to fail, enough to give Serath the story he needed, that the human doctor was a fraud, that Marcus's methods were dangerous, that the queen must be returned to the care of her real physicians, that Marcus must go home. Talia would live with what she was about to do for a very long time, but that was later. For now she smiled at Marcus, handed him the calibration wand, said, "Ready when you are, boss." Marcus said, "Let's save a queen." Talia said, "Yeah, boss." Her voice did not shake. She had practice. The first infusion took 40 minutes. Aeliana lay very still on the medical couch. Her hair had been braided again, loose and long down one shoulder. She wore a simple pale gown. Her hand was in her lap. Marcus worked over her. He was calm on the outside. He was screaming on the inside, because every time he looked down at her face, he saw just under the surface of it a smaller face, a face with brown star freckles, a face he had bent over in a hospital bed, exactly like this one 3 years ago. He did not let his hands shake. He did not let his hands shake. His hands did not shake. Ran stood at the other side of the couch, watching every reading on the diagnostic array, speaking softly to 2 junior physicians, cross-checking, adjusting. Aeliana looked up at Marcus. She said, "Marcus." "Yes." "Breathe." He almost laughed, because he was the doctor. He was the one who was supposed to tell her that. He breathed. She closed her eyes. The infusion continued. Halfway through, she opened her eyes again and said quietly, just to him, "Tell me about her. Now." He hesitated, because he had not told this story to anyone in 3 years, because he had been afraid that saying her name out loud would make her real again, and if she was real again, then losing her would be real again. He said she sang to her dolls. What did she sing? Nonsense. She made up the words. Was she pretty? She was beautiful. Did she look like you? No, she looked like her mother, but she had my laugh. That is a good laugh to give a child. He looked down at Aeliana. Her eyes were closed again, but there was a small smile on her mouth. He said, "She would have liked you." Aeliana said, "I would have liked her." The infusion ran to completion. Aeliana slept. Marcus and Kaivo watched the readings hold steady for 6 hours. Steady, steady, steady. That night, Marcus stood at the laboratory window and looked out at the 2 moons of Vealoth and did not cry. He wanted to. He did not, because he was not ready yet. Because if he cried now over a girl who had smiled at him from a medical couch, he would have to admit something he was not ready to admit. He would have to admit that his heart, which he had thought was closed forever, 3 years ago, was not closed. He had assumed it was buried with Lily. It was not. It was still in his chest. It was right now in the same building as a young queen with pale gold hair who had said his name softly and asked him to tell her a story about his daughter. He was in trouble. He did not know what kind yet. He would. 3 days passed. Aeliana's readings improved, not dramatically, but measurably. The cascade slowed. Her strength returned in small increments. On the 2nd day, she walked from her bed to the window without help. On the 3rd day, she walked the length of the corridor. Kaivo Ron wept quietly the 3rd day. He tried to hide it. He did not succeed. Marcus pretended not to see. On the 4th day, Aeliana came to the laboratory. She was not supposed to. She was supposed to be resting. She came anyway. She wore a soft gown of pale blue. Her hair was loose. She had color in her face for the first time Marcus had seen since he had met her, which was, he realized, only a handful of days ago. It felt longer. She said, "Show me what you are working on. You should be resting." "I have been resting for 8 months. I have been dying for 8 months. I have been watched for 8 months. I want to see something. Show me." He showed her. He walked her through the molecular models. She listened, asked, understood more than he expected, because she had been quietly reading medical journals for 3 years in secret, at 3 in the morning, in the little study behind her mother's bookshelves. Halfway through, she saw the photograph. He had not meant to leave it out. It was in a small silver frame on the corner of the projection table. He had opened it once that morning and forgotten to close it. Lily, age 7, on a beach somewhere, sun in her hair, a shell in each hand, grinning like she had just invented grinning. Aeliana stopped talking. She lifted the frame very carefully. She looked at Lily for a long time. Then she said, "Oh, that was all. Just, oh." Marcus said, "That was 2 summers before she got sick. She has your smile. They tell me she has your smile." He did not know why she said it twice. Aeliana said, "May I?" "Yes." She held the frame against her chest, just for a moment, then set it very carefully back on the table. She said, "When I am well." "Yes." "There is a small garden near the eastern terrace. It has never had a name. My mother used to plant white flowers there. I would like to name it after her." "After your mother? After your daughter?" Marcus could not speak. Aeliana said softly, "So she is not forgotten. In this palace, not while I breathe." Marcus said, "Your Majesty." "Aeliana, Aeliana." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. She reached out, touched his hand, very briefly, the way she had in her chamber on the first day. Then she said, "I would like to take a walk in the gardens tonight." "You should not." "I would like to." "With whom?" "You." He said, "All right." They walked in the gardens at dusk. 2 guards followed at a distance. Kaivo ran walk with them. The three of them moved slowly along a stone path lined with silver wing lanterns. The moons had come out, both of them, small and pale, hanging in the sky like coins in a pool. Aeliana said, "When my mother was alive, she called me her sunrise, her sunrise. For 3 years I have thought that sunrise had ended. It has not. How do you know? Because I am walking with it." She looked at him. Her eyes were very dark in the twilight. The blue silver had gone almost gray. She was very beautiful. She was very young. She was very tired. She said, "You are a dangerous man, Marcus Ellsworth. I am not. You are, because you do not know that you are saying things that a queen should not be told." "What things?" "Kind things." She kept walking. Kaivo ran 5 paces behind, allowed himself a very small smile in the dark. He did not know quite what he was smiling about. He knew he was smiling. Marcus said, "May I ask you something?" "Yes." "You have carried this alone for 3 years." "Yes." "Why did you never tell anyone? Even Sariel, she has known you since you were a baby." Aeliana was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Because 6 months ago I saw her leaving my uncle's private chambers at an hour when no maid should be there." Marcus stopped walking. "Aeliana, I know." "Are you certain?" "I have been certain for 4 months. I have been checking. She has been carrying messages. She thinks I don't know." "Aeliana, I know." "She has been with you since you were 3 days old." "Yes, that is." "I know what it is." Her voice did not break. She had, Marcus realized, cried about this already, somewhere, alone, many times. She had done all her crying alone. She said, "That is why I did not tell you in my chamber, because I did not want you to know I already knew, because saying it out loud would have made me break, and I did not want to break in front of the man who was going to save my life." "Aeliana, I am telling you now." "Why?" She stopped walking, looked at him. She said, "Because I do not want to be alone in that room anymore." Kaivo ran 5 paces behind, heard. Kaivo ran, said quietly into the dark, "You are not alone." Aeliana turned, looked at him. Her mouth trembled, very small, very brief. She whispered, "Kaivo." He crossed the distance between them. He was an old man in silver-threaded robes. He opened his arms. She stepped into them. She was 22 years old, and she cried into the shoulder of the man who had held her when she was 3 days old, and she cried the way she had not been permitted to cry in 3 years, the way a daughter cries into her father's coat, the way a queen is never permitted to cry. And Kaivo ran, held her. Marcus stepped back, turned toward the moons, because this was not for him. He watched a silver-winged bird glide across the twin moons. He touched the small braided bracelet in his coat pocket. He whispered so quietly no one could hear, "Lily, she has him. She has us. She is going to be all right." The silver-winged bird disappeared into the dark. He was not sure if he believed himself. He wanted to. The next morning, the second infusion was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Talia had prepared it. Marcus checked it, because he always checked, because that was his habit, because he had never lost a patient. He had checked twice. He did not check it twice today, because he was tired, because he had walked in a garden with the queen the night before, because he had watched a young woman cry in the arms of an old physician who loved her like a daughter, because for the first time in 3 years he had gone to bed with something other than grief in his chest. He checked it once. He did not see the drop. He would remember that forever. The infusion began at 10. Aeliana was calm. She lay on the couch. She smiled at Marcus. She said, "See you on the other side, doctor." He said, "I'll be here." The first 3 minutes were fine. At minute 4, her hand twitched. At minute 5, her monitor let out a soft warning chime. At minute 6, Aeliana said, "Marcus, something is wrong." At minute 7, she convulsed. Her back arched. Her hand tore free of the couch strap. The diagnostic array screamed. Cavo Ran was already moving. Talia was already moving. 2 junior physicians rushed the couch. Marcus said, "No, no, 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 no." He said it under his breath. He did not know he was saying it, because Aeliana's monitor was flatlining and coming back and flatlining again, because her lips were turning blue, because her hand, the hand that had touched his last night in the garden, was seizing against the couch strap. He was moving fast. Talia was already handing him the emergency kit before he had finished asking. He injected the counter compound. He adjusted the flow. He barked orders. Cavo Ran was at the head of the couch, one steady hand on Aeliana's forehead, murmuring her name in a voice like a lullaby. For 20 seconds, 20 seconds, 20 seconds in which Marcus Ellsworth thought, "Not again, God, God, not again." 20 seconds in which Talia Brennick stood at the monitor and watched the vitals she had helped destabilize and discovered that she had made a mistake because she had thought the drop would slow the treatment, would produce a mild rejection, would fail visibly. She had not thought about how a body already this weak would react. Talia said, "Oh God." Nobody heard her. She stepped back from the monitor. She pressed both hands to her mouth. She was going to be sick. She stayed on her feet because she had to, because if she fell now someone would look at her, and if someone looked at her, someone would see. At second 21, Aeliana's heart caught. At second 22, it steadied. At second 25, her lips began to pink again. Cavo Ran's shoulders dropped 1 inch. Marcus's did not, because her eyes had not opened. Marcus said, "Aeliana." Nothing. "Aeliana." Nothing. Cavo said, "She is stable. Her eyes are not open." "She is stable, Marcus." "Her eyes are not. She is unconscious. She will wake. Breathe." Marcus did not breathe. Cavo said again, very firm, "Breathe, my son." Marcus breathed. His hand went without thinking to his coat pocket. His fingers found the small braided bracelet. He held it like a prayer. He said, "Lily." He did not know he had said it out loud. Cavo Ran heard. Cavo Ran said nothing, but Cavo Ran's hand found Marcus's shoulder and stayed there. Aeliana did not wake up that day. She did not wake up that night. She did not wake up the next morning. Sirath Vokun arrived at the medical wing at 11 o'clock on the second day. His voice was raised. His grief was already public. He was demanding that Marcus be removed from her care. He was demanding that Marcus be detained. He was demanding that the human doctor answer for what he had done to the beloved sovereign of Ithari. Cavo Ran stepped in front of him. Cavo Ran said, in a voice colder than Marcus had ever heard, "If Dr. Ellsworth had wanted to harm her, my lord, he would not have saved her when her heart failed. He is not a physician of this court. He is now. You will regret this, Cavo. I already regret many things, my lord. I do not regret this. Sareth left, but before he did, he glanced past Kaivo, once, very briefly, at Talia. Marcus saw it. Marcus did not know what he had seen, but he saw it. His stomach turned over. He did not have time to think about it, because Aeliana was still not awake, because he was staying at her bedside, because he had not eaten in 29 hours, because he had not left the medical wing, because Kaivo Ron had at some point in the night brought him a small cup of the Ithari version of coffee, sat down beside him and said, "You cannot save her by refusing to sleep." Marcus had said, "I know." Kaivo had said, "I have been in your chair many times." Marcus had said, "How do you bear it?" Kaivo Ran had been quiet for a long time. Then he had said, "You do not bear it. You survive it." And then one day someone you love wakes up and holds your hand and says your name, and you understand that you have not wasted the years of waiting. Marcus had said, "And if she doesn't, then you will still not have wasted them." Marcus had looked at the old physician. Kaivo Ron had said, "Because loving someone is not a waste, even when it ends." Marcus had put down the cup. He had bent forward. He had put his face in his hands. He had not cried, not fully. He had done that alone quietly later in the small guest chamber that had been assigned to him. But something inside him, something that had been packed away in a small box marked Lily for 3 years, had cracked open, and he had said into his hands so quietly that Kaivo almost did not hear, "I did not save my daughter." Kaivo Ran said, "I know, you did not know. I do now." Kaivo Ran's hand was on Marcus's shoulder again. Kaivo Ran said, "You are not God, Marcus Ellsworth." Marcus laughed, a broken sound. Kaivo said, "You are just a father who was trying to save his girl." Marcus did not move for a very long time. When he lifted his face, his eyes were wet. Kaivo did not comment. Kaivo drank his coffee. They sat together in the low light beside a young queen who had not yet woken up, and they did not say anything else for a long, long time. Aeliana woke on the 3rd day, just before dawn. Her eyes opened. She saw Marcus. She was too weak to smile, but she tried. She said, "You're still here." He said, "I'm still here." "How long?" 3 days. "Oh, Aeliana." "Yes. Something went wrong. I know. It was not the formula. I know that too." He blinked. She said, "I could feel it. Before the seizure. Something was wrong with the infusion. It was not what you gave me the first time. It was different." Marcus said very slowly, "How could you feel that? I have lived inside this body for 3 years while someone poisoned it. I know what wrong tastes like." He stared at her. She said, "Marcus, someone tampered with it." His stomach was already turning, because he had seen Sareth glance at Talia, because Talia had been the one who prepared the second infusion, because he had not double-checked it, because Talia had brought coffee to Vealoth from Earth and had been by his side for 3 months and had thrown nutrient bars at his chest and had told him he looked terrible tired. Marcus said quietly, "Oh no." Aeliana reached for his hand. She was very weak, but she said clearly, "Do not tell Kaivo yet. We will handle this ourselves." Aeliana, "Yes, I have to know something." "What? Are you going to hate her?" Aeliana looked at him. Her eyes were tired and steady and much older than 22. She said, "Marcus, I have loved traitors before. I am not new to this. Tell me who she is, and we will decide together what mercy she is owed." He said, "Her name is Talia." Aeliana closed her eyes. "Bring her to me, alone, tomorrow." "Yes." "And Marcus." "Yes." "Do not blame yourself." "I do. I know. I checked it once. I should have checked it twice. You were tired. I should have." "Marcus." "Yes." "You saved me. I stopped breathing and you brought me back. I do not care what you missed. I care what you caught." He could not answer. She said softly, "Now, sit down. You are swaying." He sat down. She kept her hand on his. The sun rose slowly outside the wide crystal window. Somewhere in the palace, a bell rang. In her chamber in another wing, Sariel would soon be brushing an empty pillow. In his private study, Sarath Vokun would soon be receiving a report that the queen had survived the second infusion and that Dr. Ellsworth had not been removed. Sarath would not smile at that report. Sarath would understand for the first time that he had underestimated something. He would not yet know what, but he would start planning. That afternoon, Marcus met with Talia in a small side laboratory. He locked the door. He said, "Talia." She said, "Yes, boss." She was pale. She had not slept. She was trying to smile. He said, "I know." She said, "Know what?" He looked at her. She looked at him. Her mouth trembled. She said, "My brother." "I know." They said, "I know." "Marcus?" "Yes." "I did not want to. I did not want to. I did not want to. Talia did not want to. I love you. I love her. I love your Lily. Talia. I couldn't. They showed me pictures of him. They said, "Talia, sit down." She sat down, very fast. Her legs went. She put her hands over her face. She cried the way a person cries when they have been carrying something for weeks and are finally allowed to set it down. Marcus watched her. He did not touch her. He was not ready to touch her, but he did not walk away either, because he had watched a queen forgive a lifetime of betrayal in the dim light of a garden, because he had listened to an old physician say, "Loving someone is not a waste," because he had held a small braided bracelet in his pocket while his daughter had been dying, and he had understood only in the last 3 days that grief and mercy were the same muscle. He said, "Talia." She said, "Please, please, please." He said, "Her Majesty wants to see you tomorrow." She said, "She's going to kill me." "No." "She should." "She won't." "How do you know?" He said quietly, "Because she is nothing like her uncle." Talia lifted her face from her hands. Her mascara was ruined. Her mouth was open. She looked in that moment like a little girl who had done something terrible in the kitchen and did not yet know that her mother had already forgiven her. She said, "Marcus, boss." He said, "We are going to keep your brother safe." She stared at him. "How?" "By making you useful in a different way." "You mean you are going to keep working for Sarath?" "What?" "You are going to keep telling him whatever he wants to hear." "Boss." "And you are going to tell us everything, every message, every meeting, every drop of information he thinks he is buying from you. He will keep your brother alive as long as he thinks you are working for him. So you will work for him, except you will be working for us." Talia's mouth trembled again. She said, "You would trust me." Marcus said, "I would try." She whispered, "Why?" He looked at her. He said, "Because Aeliana asked me to." Talia bent forward. Her forehead touched her knees. She cried again. Marcus did not touch her, but he did not leave. He stayed until she was breathing normally. Then he said, "Get some sleep. Tomorrow you meet the queen. She will be kinder to you than you can imagine, but she will not be gentle. Do you understand?" Talia said yes. "Good." She looked up. She said, "Marcus." "Yes." "You have changed." He said, "I know." He walked out. He walked all the way back to his own quarters, slowly, because he was tired, because the corridor was long, because the palace at that hour smelled faintly of jasmine and star lilies, which Aeliana had told him were her mother's favorite. He passed a wide archway. Through it he could see the small eastern garden, the unnamed one, the one Aeliana had said she wanted to name. He stopped. He looked at it for a long time. He took the small braided bracelet out of his pocket. He held it up. He said so quietly it was almost only breath, "Lily, sweetheart, there's going to be a garden just for you in a palace on another world full of white flowers because a very brave queen said so." He did not cry. Almost. He put the bracelet back in his pocket. He walked on. Somewhere behind him, high in a tower window, Aeliana Vor'Thess sat propped against her pillows and watched a very tired man in a dark coat walk across the archway and stop and lift something small from his pocket and stand there for a long time. She did not know what he was holding. She could guess. She did not look away. When he began walking again, she whispered to no one, to the room, to her mother's portrait, on the vanity table, to the ghost of a small girl she had never met. "He has us, Lily, and we have him, and nobody is alone in this palace tonight." Talia met the queen at dawn, just the two of them. Kaivo Ron waited outside the door with his hand on the pommel of a ceremonial blade he had not drawn in 40 years. Marcus stood beside him. Neither of them spoke. Inside the chamber, Aeliana sat on her low couch by the window. Her hair had been brushed. Her gown was pale blue. She looked 22 years old, and she looked at the same time older than anyone in the palace. Talia stopped just inside the door. She did not know if she was supposed to kneel. She knelt anyway, because her legs would not hold her up. She said, "Your Majesty." Aeliana said, "Come closer." Talia came closer. Closer. Talia knelt again, directly in front of the couch. Aeliana looked at her for a long time, not with fury, not with pity, with something quieter, with the expression of a young woman who had learned at 19 that betrayal was rarely about hatred, that it was almost always about fear. Aeliana said, "Your brother." Talia flinched. "Yes, Your Majesty." "How old?" 22. Aeliana's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "The same age I am." Talia looked up. "Yes." Aeliana said softly, "Then you have been trying to save someone who is my age from something you could not control. I understand that. I have been trying to do the same thing." Talia's chin trembled. She said, "Your Majesty, I am so sorry." Aeliana said, "I know. I never wanted. I know. I love him. He is all I have left." "I know that too." Talia was crying now, quietly. She was not trying to hide it. There was no point. Aeliana reached out. She placed one pale hand very briefly on the crown of Talia's head, the way a mother might, the way a sister might. She said, "I forgive you." Talia broke. She sobbed the way a person sobs when they have been holding a rock in their chest for weeks and someone has just lifted it out. She pressed her forehead to the floor. She said, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty." Aeliana said, "Rise." Talia rose on shaking knees. Aeliana said, You are going to help us end him, and when it is over, my treasury will fetch your brother from earth and bring him here, where no one will threaten him again. Do you understand?" Talia said, "Yes." "Good. Why? Why what? Why are you doing this? For me?" Aeliana looked at her. She said, "Because when I was 19 years old, someone should have forgiven me for surviving my mother, and no one did. I have carried that alone for 3 years. I will not put it on you as well." Talia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Aeliana said gently, "Go, rest, then work." Talia went. Kaivo Ron was still outside the door. Talia passed him. She stopped, turned to him, bowed, not to his rank, to him. Kaivo Ron said quietly, "Child." She said, "Sir." "Go." She went. The next 12 days were a war fought in whispers. Talia carried Sarath's messages. Talia reported them all. Aeliana wove them into the wall of gold cord threads in her mother's small study. Kaivo Ron identified suppliers. Marcus refined the treatment. He rebuilt every formulation from scratch. He accounted for the second poisoning. He accounted for accumulated damage. He accounted for the small drop Talia had added, which had told him something crucial. It had told him what compound Sarath was using, which meant he could design a formula that did 2 things at once: halt the disease, purge the poison. Aeliana watched the model rotate slowly in the air above the projection table one night and said, "This is not a treatment." Marcus said, "No, this is a cure." "Maybe." Marcus, "Yes, say it." He said, "It is a cure." She did not smile. She closed her eyes. She said, "Mother, did you hear that?" She was speaking to the empty room. Marcus said nothing. She opened her eyes, looked at him, said, "1 more infusion." "Yes." "When?" 6 days. "Do it in 5. 5 is aggressive. Do it in 5. He is moving faster. He knows something is different. I need to be on my feet before he decides to try again." Marcus nodded. He did not tell her he had not slept more than 3 hours a night in 8 days. She could see. She said, "You are going to sleep tonight, Marcus." "I have work." "You will sleep. Kaivo will sit with the data. Talia will sit with the samples. You will sleep. That is an order." "Aeliana." "An order." He said, "Yes, Your Majesty." She smiled, small, warm. She said, "Aeliana, only Aeliana, when we are alone." He said, "Aeliana." She said, "Good." He slept that night for the first time in a very long time, not because he was less afraid, because he had been ordered to, and because the person who had ordered him to had believed he was worth the order. He dreamed. He dreamed of Lily. He dreamed she was holding a white flower and saying, "Daddy, it's okay. Go take care of her. I'm here." He did not remember the dream when he woke. He remembered the feeling. He carried it into the morning. Sarath made his move on the 4th day. He was not stupid. He had been at this for 3 years. He had noticed Aeliana's color improving. He had noticed the ministers returning to her council. He had noticed Kaivo Ron no longer meeting his eyes. He had noticed Talia's reports growing subtly less specific. He decided that Dr. Ellsworth had to lose his laboratory. Just before midnight, 3 men in unmarked coats entered the primary medical wing. They carried short-range disruptors. They knew exactly which equipment to destroy, which was in itself information, because they had been briefed by someone with access. They wrecked 8 months of research in 40 seconds. The projection tables shattered. The molecular fabricators fused. The refrigerated compound stores were breached. Every dose of the new formula, every backup, every calibration setting, gone. They were out of the wing before the alarms finished sounding. Marcus arrived at the ruined lab at 12:40 in the morning. He stood in the doorway. He looked at what remained of 8 months of work. He said softly, "Oh, that was all. Just, oh." He turned, walked back down the corridor. Kaivo Ran was already coming toward him at speed. Kaivo said, "Marcus." Marcus said, "It is gone." "How much?" "All of it. All the compound, all the models, all the calibration." "How long until the next infusion?" 6 hours. Kaivo Ran did not curse. He did something worse. He went very still, and then he said in a voice like a blade being unsheathed, "He does not know about the second lab." Marcus said, "What?" "Follow me." Aeliana had ordered it built the week her mother had died. 3 years ago, when she was 19, when she had first begun to suspect, because she had understood even then that if she ever found someone she could trust with the truth, she would also need a place they could not reach. Marcus had never been told. Kaivo Ran had never been told. Only 3 people had known. Aeliana, a very old palace engineer named Ovric, who had installed her mother's private observatory when Aeliana was 6, and a stone mason whose family had served the Vor'Thess line for 4 generations and who had died of natural causes 10 days after finishing the work. It was under the eastern wing, behind a false wall in a servant's passage, no one used anymore. 2 rooms, basic power, basic filtration, basic tables, enough. Kaivo Ran led Marcus down the corridor and through a door and down a stairwell and through another door and down another stairwell and along a passage that smelled like cold stone and old lavender. And Marcus said, "How does she?" Kaivo said, "She is her mother's daughter." They reached the false wall. Kaivo pressed the panel. The wall slid aside. Marcus stepped in. Talia was already there. She was crying while she worked. She had set up the smaller of the 2 fabricators. She had already begun pulling the backup molecular signatures from a small, encrypted drive Aeliana had given her 3 days earlier, because Aeliana had quietly made backups, because Aeliana had spent 3 years learning that if you did not make backups, you died. Talia looked up. She said, "Boss." Marcus said, "How long?" 4 hours, maybe less. He looked at the equipment. It was old, it was slow, it was enough. He said, "Do it in 3. Talia said, "Yes, boss." Kaivo Ran said, "I will bring her." Marcus said, "Where is she?" Kaivo said, "Where she has been for 3 years, in her mother's study, watching the wall." Aeliana came down at 4 in the morning. She walked, on her own. She would not be carried. Kaivo Ran walked 1 step behind her the whole way. He did not touch her. He did not need to. His presence was a hand at her elbow made of 40 years of love. She stepped into the small underground laboratory. Her hair was loose. Her gown was pale gray. She had put no crown on. She had not put on shoes worth mentioning. She looked like a girl, not a queen. She looked at Marcus. She said, "You are still here." He said, "I am still here." She smiled, not big, but real. She lay down on the table. Talia handed Marcus the infusion. Marcus checked it twice. He checked it 3 times. He checked it 4. Kaivo Ran watched him check. Kaivo Ran said, "Enough." Marcus said, "One more." Kaivo said, "Marcus, enough." Marcus stopped. Aeliana said, "Marcus." He looked down at her. She said, "Do it." He did it. The infusion took 38 minutes. Marcus watched every reading, every one. For the first 10 minutes, nothing changed. Then slowly the cascade began to reverse. Not slow the way a river slows before it stills, slow the way a wound closes, layer by layer, cell by cell. The neural markers began to lift. The damaged tissue began to seek its structure. The toxin, which had lived in her body for 3 years, began to break down and pass out through her metabolism like something being escorted politely to the door. At minute 22, Kaivo ran, watching the display, said, "Buy all the light." At minute 28, one of the junior technicians who had been quietly recruited that night began to cry. At minute 35, Aeliana opened her eyes. She looked up at Marcus. She said, "I feel it." He said, "What?" She said, "It's leaving, Marcus. It's leaving." He could not speak. She said, "It's leaving me." He put his hand on her forehead. He said one word. He said, "Yes." Her eyes filled. She did not blink. She said, "You did it. Marcus, you did it." He shook his head. He said, "You did it. Marcus, you, Aeliana, you lived long enough for anyone to try. You survived 19. You survived the funerals. You survived 3 years of dinners with him. You gathered every piece. You built the wall. You built this room. I only made the medicine. You did it." Kaivo ran, standing behind them, wiped his face with the back of his hand, and did not try to hide it. Aeliana closed her eyes. Just for a moment. She said so softly it was almost only breath, "Mother, I did it, I did it, I did it." Dawn on Vealoth came in bands of pale rose and gold across the eastern sky. Aeliana walked out of the underground laboratory on her own feet at 6 in the morning, with her hair loose and her hand tucked into the elbow of an old physician who was too proud to be seen crying and too tired to hide it. She said to Kaivo Ron, "Bring the council." He said, "Now, now." "Your Majesty." Kaivo, "Yes. Bring the council, all of them. Bring my uncle." He said, "Yes, my child." He caught himself. She heard him. She smiled. She did not correct him. She said, "Bring him." The assembly hall of Ithari held its breath. 300 voices, silent, because the doors had opened, because the Queen of Ithari was walking through them, because she was walking on her own feet. She wore a gown of deep gold. Her hair had been braided into a low coil, and a small silver crown had been set on her head. She was pale. She was thin. She was radiant. She walked the full length of the assembly floor without a single support. The ministers rose one by one as she passed, not by rank, by instinct. Kaivo, Ron walked 5 paces behind her. Marcus walked 10 paces behind Kaivo. Talia walked 10 paces behind Marcus. Sarath Vokun sat in his high seat to the right of the throne and did not stand. He did not stand. Everyone in the hall noticed. Aeliana reached the central platform. She turned. She looked out at the assembly. She looked at Sarath. She smiled, very small, very cold. Then she said in a voice that carried without effort to every corner of the vaulted room, "My lords, my ladies, my council." Silence. 3 years ago, my mother died in this palace. Silence. 8 months ago, I began to die in this palace. Silence. 6 days ago, a visiting physician cured me. The hall stirred. Whispers, sharp intakes of breath. She lifted her hand. The hall went silent again. She said, "But I did not summon this assembly to speak of my recovery." She turned, very slowly, towards Serath. She said, "I summoned it to name my mother's murderer." Serath did not move. He was too experienced to move, but something in his face changed, very small, very brief. Aeliana saw. She said, "Uncle." Serath said, "My dear niece, I fear your recent illness has uncle." He fell silent. She said, "You will not speak again in this hall unless I permit it. Do you understand?" He said, "You are unwell. Guards." 2 guards stepped forward. Serath said nothing else. Aeliana turned back to the assembly. She said, "I have gathered this account for 3 years. I have gathered it alone. I have gathered it in secret. I have gathered it because I promised my mother on the day she died in my arms that I would." She lifted her voice. "Bring the record." Kaivo Ran stepped forward. He placed a small dark cylinder on the central podium. He said, "The Queen's evidence." He stepped back. Aeliana said, "The transfers, the suppliers, the correspondence, the kitchen movements, the chemistry, the parallel between my mother's decline and mine, the signatures of the compound my uncle has been purchasing under 3 false accounts for 11 years. All of it, documented, sealed, notarized this morning by 4 independent registrars." She looked at the assembly. "I will not read it to you now. My council will study it in full, but I will tell you what it says. It says that my uncle, Serath Vokun, poisoned my mother slowly across 2 years, killed her when I was 19, and then began the same on me." The hall exploded. Ministers rose. Voices rose. Someone shouted. Someone else called for order. A woman in the 3rd gallery began to weep. The chief of the guard advanced 2 steps towards Serath before Aeliana raised her hand. She said, "Silence." The hall obeyed. Serath tried once more. He said, "This is..." She said, "Uncle." Her voice was very quiet. Everyone in the hall heard it. She said, "You held my hand at my mother's funeral and whispered that I was not alone and that you would guide me." Serath's mouth moved. Nothing came out. She said, "You lied." The silence in the hall was enormous. She said, "You underestimated the girl who watched you do it." She looked down at him from the platform. She was 22 years old. She looked in that moment like a woman who had aged 5 lifetimes in one dawn. She said, "Take him." The guards took him. He did not struggle. He looked at her just once as they turned him toward the doors. His eyes were cold. Her eyes were colder. He was led from the hall. The doors closed behind him. The assembly did not speak. Aeliana turned back to them. She said quietly, "This is not a victory." They listened. She said, "This is a survival." They listened. She said, "And I would not be standing here if a stranger from another world had not walked into my chamber and cried without knowing why." Every head in the hall turned to Marcus. Marcus wanted to sink into the floor. He did not, because Aeliana was looking at him from the platform, and she was smiling, small, real. He straightened his coat. He met her eyes. She said, "Dr. Ellsworth, come forward." He came forward. She said, "Kneel." He knelt. She said, "Rise." He rose. She said to the assembly, "Let it be recorded that on this morning, in the presence of this council, I, Aeliana Vor'Thess, sovereign of Ithari, do hereby declare the founding of the Vor'Thess Institute of Interspecies Medicine to be built on this world and on any world that will have it, to share every discovery of this house openly, freely, between our peoples and any other people who will meet us with respect." She paused. She said, "It will be led jointly by my chief royal physician, Kavo Ran, and by the physician of earth, Marcus Ellsworth." Marcus opened his mouth. She said, "Do not argue with me in front of the assembly, Dr. Ellsworth." He closed his mouth. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the hall, not mocking, warm, the laughter of a room that had been holding its breath for 8 months and was finally being permitted to exhale. Aeliana said, "For centuries, our peoples have believed that difference is danger. I am alive today because a man from Earth chose to save a stranger, not because I was a queen, not because he was owed a debt, because he understood a truth that our finest scholars have missed." She said softly, "Every life is worthy of saving." The assembly did not applaud. The assembly rose. Every single person in the hall. They stood for her, for him, for the small braided bracelet in his coat pocket, for a woman named Aeliana Vor'Thess who had died 3 years earlier saying, "Watch him," for every child who had ever been lost to something the world had said could not be stopped. Aeliana closed her eyes for just 1 second, then she opened them. She said, "That is all." She stepped down from the platform and walked out of the hall on her own 2 feet. 2 days after Sarath was taken, Aeliana asked to see Sariel alone. The woman who had rocked her to sleep when she was 3 days old sat across from her in the small study. She did not kneel. She did not speak. She just looked at her hands. Aeliana said, "How long?" Sariel said, 7 years. 7. He came to me after my son died. He said he would help. He gave me money. He gave me peace. I thought he was kind. Then he was not. Aeliana closed her eyes. "You could have told me." "I know." "You could have told my mother." "I know." The silence in the chamber was old and heavy. Finally, Aeliana said, "You will leave the palace tonight. You will go to the northern provinces. You will live quietly. No one will hurt you. No one will help you either. That is my mercy." Sariel's mouth trembled. She said, "Your Majesty, do not thank me. I was not going to." "Good." Sariel rose. She walked to the door. At the door she turned. She said softly, "Your mother would be proud of the woman you have become." Aeliana did not turn to look at her. She said, "Get out." Sariel went. Aeliana sat alone in the chamber for a long time, not crying, not moving, just breathing. Then she got up, walked to the vanity table, picked up the small silver-framed portrait of her mother. She said, "It is done, Mama. All of it. It is done." The days that followed did not feel real, not to Marcus. He kept expecting to wake up in the small guest chamber of the diplomatic wing 3 months earlier and find that none of it had happened, that there had been no queen, no poisoning, no underground lab, no dawn walk into the assembly hall. But the palace had changed. Servants who had spoken in whispers for 8 months now spoke in normal voices. The kitchens hummed. The gardens were being tended. The eastern gallery, which had been closed since Aeliana Vor'Thess had died, was being aired out and prepared as a wing for visiting scholars from off-world. Aeliana grew stronger every day. The color came back into her face. The tremor left her hands. She walked farther and faster, and on the 9th day, after the assembly was seen laughing on the south terrace at something Kavo Ran had said, she had not laughed in the south terrace in 3 years. A servant who had known her since she was a child heard it from the corridor and had to sit down for a moment because her knees would not hold her. The Vor'Thess Institute began construction within 2 weeks. Marcus watched the first foundation stone laid. He was not asked to speak. He was grateful. He had discovered a public man. He was a man who had loved a small girl with brown star freckles. He was a man who had, in a palace on another world, been given permission to love again. He did not yet know what that meant. He was starting to find out. The garden was ready 12 days after the assembly. The white flowers had already been planted. They were an Ithari variety star lilies, small and delicate, native to the mountains north of the capital. Aeliana had insisted on choosing them herself. She met Marcus at the entrance one evening at dusk. She was alone. She wore a simple gown of pale cream. Her hair was loose. Her feet were bare on the warm stone. She said, "Come in." He came in. The garden was small, enclosed, peaceful, a low wall of pale gold stone, a single stone bench, a shallow reflecting pool at the center, and around the pool, all around it, thousands of tiny white star lilies. Above the entrance, carved into the stone in careful Ithari script that had been translated painstakingly by Kaivo Ran himself, "The Garden of Lily." Marcus stopped in the doorway. He put his hand on the stone. He did not move. Aeliana said, "Kaivo, help me with the translation." Marcus said, You did this. I did this." Aeliana, "Yes." I don't know what to say." She said, "Say her name here." He looked at her. She said, "Just once, out loud, so the garden knows." He walked slowly to the reflecting pool. He knelt at the edge of it. He took the small braided bracelet out of his coat pocket. He held it in his open hand. He said, "Lily," just that. The word came out cracked. He said, "Sweetheart, there's a garden on another world full of white flowers for you." He was crying now. He did not try to stop. He said, "I couldn't save you. Baby, I tried. He put both hands over his face. He wept, not the way he had wept for 3 years. That weeping had been silent, ashamed, locked in bathrooms and closets and empty parking garages at 3 in the morning. This was different. This was crying out loud in a garden in front of another human being. Well, not human, but a person, the best person he had ever met. Aeliana knelt beside him. She did not touch him. She waited. She had learned in her life that grief did not want to be interrupted. It wanted to be witnessed. When he was ready, she said softly, "Marcus." He said, "Yes, she would be proud of you. You didn't know her. I know her father." He looked at her. She was crying too, silently, the tears just running. She said, "I have been so alone. I know, for so long. I know. And you came. You called me. I did not know I was calling you. I know." She said softly, "Marcus." "Yes, you did not fail her. I did." "Marcus, yes, you did not fail her, because you saved me, and every child of mine, if I ever have any, will be alive because of you, and every patient this institute treats will be alive because of you, and every family that does not have to bury a daughter will be alive because you tried. Marcus, you did not fail her. She sent you here." He did not answer. He could not. He did the only thing he could do. He reached out. He put his hand over hers. 2 hands on the warm stone of the reflecting pool. in the middle of a small garden of white flowers on another world. They stayed like that for a long time. The sun set slowly. The star lilies began to glow, because they did that at dusk. Kaivo Ran had told her they would. Small pale glows, thousands of them, all around them like a field of little stars pulled down to earth. Aeliana said, "Oh." Marcus said, "Aeliana, yes." "Thank you." "For what?" He said, "For seeing her." She said, "I will always see her." He left Vealoth 11 days later. He did not want to. He had to, because there were other children on earth with the same illness pattern that had killed Lily, because the Institute had already begun sending its findings back to Earth's medical networks, because there were patients waiting who would live if he came. He would return. He had agreed to return twice a year to advise, to visit, to spend 1 week each visit in the small garden of white flowers at dusk. Aeliana walked him to the ship. Kaivo Ran walked on her other side. Talia walked behind them. Talia's brother had arrived from Earth 3 days earlier. He was 22 years old. He had cried when he had seen her. She had cried when she had seen him. Aeliana had watched from a doorway and then walked away because that particular moment was not one she needed to be inside. At the ship's ramp, Aeliana turned to Marcus. She said, "You will come back." He said, "I will." "Promise." "I promise," she said. Marcus, "Yes." She reached up. She was small. He was tall. She had to reach. She placed her hand very briefly against the side of his face. She said, "You are not alone anymore." He said, "Neither are you." She lowered her hand. She stepped back. She said formally, in front of the small crowd that had come to see him off, "Dr. Ellsworth, on behalf of the Empire of Ithari, thank you." He bowed to her, not deeply, just the small bow he had learned was appropriate. He said, "Your Majesty." He turned. He walked up the ramp. He did not look back, because if he looked back, he would not go. Aeliana stood on the launch terrace and watched the ship rise. Kaivo Ran stood beside her. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said quietly, "He will come back." She said, "Yes." "He will always come back." "Yes, because he loves you." She turned her head. Kaivo Ran was looking straight ahead at the ship, which had become a small, bright point in the pale blue sky. She said, "Kaivo." He said, "I have loved you since you were 3 days old. I am allowed to notice." She smiled. Small, real. She said, "I know. You love him. I know. What will you do?" She was quiet. She watched the small, bright point become smaller. She said, "I will grow up." Kaivo Ran looked at her. She said, "I have been 19 for 3 years. It is time to be 22, then 23, then 24. It is time to rule this empire the way my mother would have wanted me to. It is time to build the Institute. It is time to marry an empire, not a man. Not yet. Someday, maybe, but not yet." Kaivo Ran said, "And him." She said he has a daughter to grieve properly for the first time, and patience to save, and a wife who left him who he needs to make peace with, and a life that has been on hold for 3 years. He does not need me pulling him into a throne room. He needs me telling him to go home and be a whole man. And when he is whole, and when I am whole, then we will see. Kaivo Ran said, "That is very wise." She said, "It is very hard." "I know. I love him, Kaivo. I know." "I will not say it to him. Not now." "I know. Because if I said it, he would stay." "Yes. And if he stayed, He would not become the man he is meant to be, and I would not become the queen I am meant to be, and we would be two people holding each other up because we were both afraid of the dark. Kaivo Ron was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You are your mother's daughter." She said, "I hope so." "You are." She reached over, took his hand. She was still holding it when the ship became too small to see. They walked back into the palace together. Marcus stood at the window of his cabin as the ship broke atmosphere. He held the small braided bracelet in his open palm. He said, "Lily." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to, because he could feel her, for the first time in 3 years, not as a wound, as a presence, as a small girl standing behind his shoulder, one hand on his back, saying in a voice that had lived only in his memory, "Good job, Daddy, I love you. Go home." He closed his hand around the bracelet. He said, "I love you too, sweetheart." He put the bracelet back in his coat pocket. He turned away from the window because there was work, because there were patients waiting, because he was not going to waste the life a young queen had given back to him, because he was going to become the man she had needed him to be, because he was going to come back to Veloth in 6 months and walk into a garden full of white flowers at dusk and see her again, because for the first time in 3 years he was going home. And home, he realized, standing in a small cabin on a ship between two worlds, was not a place. Home was the fact of being seen by a small girl in a hospital bed, by an old physician in silver-threaded robes, by a broken assistant who had been given a second chance, by a young queen with a river of pale gold hair who had stood on her own feet in an assembly hall at dawn and had, without ever saying it, without ever needing to say it, taught him the only thing that had ever really needed teaching, that no life is disposable, that no grief is wasted, that no love is too late, that mercy is a muscle you build by using it, that the person who saves you is very often the one you save. The ship banked. The 2 moons of Veloth slipped past the window. Somewhere below, in a garden of glowing star lilies, at dusk, a young woman with pale gold hair sat on a stone bench with her hand in the hand of an old man who loved her. She looked up at the sky. She could not see the ship anymore. She smiled anyway. She whispered into the warm evening air, into the small glowing garden that bore the name of a little girl she had never met. "Fly safe, Marcus Ellsworth, fly safe, and come home." The star lilies glowed. The 2 moons rose. The night was very, very quiet, and on a world where a queen had been dying only weeks before, every window in the palace was full of light,